Listen to the mysterious story of two amateur miners who stumbled upon something extraordinary in the American West. Cecil Maine and Frank Carr were mining for gold in the San Pedro Mountains in July 1934. But what they found was much more valuable than gold. As they were blasting rocks, the dust settled and the gold disappeared. They then discovered a small cave measuring no more than 15 feet long and 4 feet wide. Inside the cave, they found a tiny human body, no more than 6.5 inches tall, sitting on a ledge in a crouching position. The human body was mummified from the Wyoming climate, and was so unique that they had no idea what it was. They decided to take the mummy and traveled 60 miles southwest to the town of Casper, where they sold it for $25. The mummy soon became known as Pedro, and was displayed in various sideshow exhibits, including a drugstore window where Floyd Jones was selling postcard souvenirs. This is where Pedro's fame began to spread. Next, Pedro became the property of Ivan Goodman, a car dealer in Casper, Wyoming, who showed the mummy off in a glass case as part of his advertising display. It's educational, it's scientific, it will amaze and thrill you. It's a pygmy preserved as it actually lived, declared the posters accompanying Pedro. They also claimed the mummy was 1,000 years old. People weren't quite sure what Pedro was. There are oral traditions of many Native American tribes, including the Sioux, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Crow, that tell of little people who stand from 20 inches to 3 feet tall. Some said that they were tiny cannibal people-eaters, while others said they were known to have been spirits and healers. These were the types of things that Westerners scoffed at until Pedro was actually found. The Shoshone Indians of Wyoming called these little people Nimriga, and they told of how these little people would attack them with tiny bows and poisoned arrows. The tales also told how they were known to kill their own kind with a single blow to the head if they became too ill. Could Pedro have been one of these little people that Native Americans talked about? Ivan Goodman took Pedro to New York, where he was examined by the American Museum of Natural History and the Anthropology Department of Harvard University. These two institutes agreed that Pedro was no hoax and was indeed a genuine human specimen. The experts disagreed as to precisely what Pedro was. One theory stated that he was a baby suffering from a rare genetic condition called anencephaly. This is a congenital disability that occurs in the womb and leads to the absence of part of the fetus's brain, skull, and scalp. Pedro's tiny size led many to believe that he was a baby even before the experts examined him. Several anthropologists from the University of Wyoming and Henry Shapiro of the American Museum of Natural History believed him to be an infant. Shapiro took X-rays and photographs of Pedro, from which he drew his conclusion. On a second trip to New York, Goodman left the mummy with Seymour Leonard Wadler, the owner and curator of a museum of marriage and love. Shortly thereafter, Goodman fell ill and died, and the mummy was never returned to the Goodman family. It has not been seen again. At some point, the museum that Mr. Wadler was operating closed, and he moved to Florida, where he lived until his death in 1980. Pedro's absence has not daunted the many people who have been searching for him. In fact, the mystery surrounding his whereabouts has only added to his legend. Many people believe that Pedro is still out there, waiting to be discovered by some lucky individual. And that's where the reward money comes in. In 2003, a $10,000 reward was offered to anyone who'd find the unknown location of Pedro. The reward was put up by a group of researchers who were hoping to learn more about the little mummy's origins, and who were eager to put an end to the mystery once and for all. The reward attracted a lot of attention, and many people began searching for Pedro in earnest. Some claimed to have found him, but their claims were never substantiated. Others were convinced that Pedro was buried somewhere in the San Pedro Mountains, where he was originally discovered. Despite the efforts of countless treasure hunters and amateur archaeologists, Pedro remains elusive to this day. But the reward money is still out there, waiting for the person who can finally solve the mystery of his disappearance. In conclusion, the story of Pedro is a fascinating one, full of twists and turns, legends and lore. From his discovery by two amateur miners in the San Pedro Mountains, to his appearances in sideshow exhibits and museums across the country, to his mysterious disappearance and the subsequent search for his unknown location, Pedro has captured the imaginations of people for generations. And while we may never know exactly what Pedro was or where he ended up, one thing is for sure: his story will continue to intrigue and inspire people for years to come. So keep searching, treasure hunters and history buffs, because the mystery of Pedro is far from over.